Hello, everyone. Today I'm going to talk about one of my favorite writers, authoresses, Jane Austen. Today I'm going to look at her book, Emma. I don't know if anyone here has read Emma or has listened to an audiobook or watched one of the many film adaptations, but I highly recommend that you at least watch a film adaptation of Emma. There have been some really good film adaptations in the past. Probably the one that I remember the most, and I know this probably is going to date me a bit, but I really liked the film that was done with Gwyneth Paltrow as Emma, and the bad guy, Frank Churchill, was done by Ewan McGregor. Now, more recently, there was a film done in 2020 which had Anya Taylor-Joy as Emma and Johnny Flynn as Mr. Knightley. And even some of my brothers who saw it thought it was incredibly hilarious, and it was very well done, and the cast in it was solid. Like, I'm talking super solid. Even the historical where fans, so like Bernadette Banner and Caroline and stuff, said that the costuming and everything was really, on par for it, very chef's kiss. And the actual cast for it is just tons of famous stars. So, for example, besides Anya Taylor-Joy and Johnny Flynn, there is Miranda Hart, who you might remember, and Bill Nighy is in it. Rupert Graves is in it. So there's just like a bunch of people in it. I highly recommend you check out the 2020 version of Emma. Now, getting to Emma itself. One of the things that is very fascinating about Emma is that the story is about a young woman who is incredibly, shall we say, outgoing, aggressive, opinionated, and spoiled. And this is what I really like about Jane Austen, because while she is writing about women and she's really showing them as being incredibly agential in society, at the same point in time, it's very clear that her female heroines are incredibly human, and they have their flaws as much as they have their strengths and virtues. And so it's very fascinating to read these books because she really goes into how women can sometimes be part of the problem, shall we say. So if you are into this sort of story where we have a young spoiled female who has to learn a few tough lessons about life, you should check out Emma. So on the back of my copy, it says, "This comedy of manners, published in 1816, features Emma as an avowed spinster and matchmaker who is convinced that she knows the best who should marry whom. And despite Austen's own doubts, the charming and infuriating heroine is a favorite of many readers. Having almost ruined the prospects of Harriet Smith, her protégée, and been reprimanded by her good friend George Knightley, Emma finally learns a little humility. She also comes to some surprising conclusions about love and marriage." So if we really think about it, we have this young woman who is an avowed spinster, right? So she is basically saying, I'm never going to get married. However, she has come to the conclusion that she is good at matchmaking, so she's going to tell people how to live their lives. And she is going to basically badger other females around her. Yep, that is the story. So if you are very interested in hearing the adventures of Emma, I recommend picking it up. There are, of course, many editions that you can get for super cheap online, but because Jane Austen is, of course, incredibly classical and has far past publication dates in terms of copyright and stuff, you can actually find a ton of free versions online. And I'm sure that there are some really good audiobooks out there. If you are not as interested in reading an Austen, but you still want to enjoy the story, I recommend, once again, checking out the 2020 version Okay, so that's it for the non-spoiler section. Let's get into the spoilers. So one of the reasons why I really like this book is about a very strong female. She is very intense, she's very intelligent, and she will speak her mind, and she's going to tell people how to live their life. And this is not always a bad thing, right? This can be very helpful. In many ways, she is working from a sense of desire to help people, but there's also a sense of pride and kind of controlling aspects to her behavior. And this is where I think it's very fascinating to kind of start thinking about how Emma really speaks to some of our cultural scenes that we're seeing today, where we have tons of women telling other women how to think or feel about certain things going on in society. So Emma is very opinionated, very outgoing, and she is also, interestingly enough, very almost aromantic, right? She has these feelings that come in and out every now and then, but overall she is kind of flying high and alone. And of course that is all going to change. I really liked how Emma progresses from being this person who is genuinely, nice and helpful into someone who's very prideful and pushy and bossy, and shall we say she actually at one point bullies a woman. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then she basically has her comeuppance, and she comes out at the end a better person, but still very much herself. So this isn't about disempowering women. It's about maturing women so that women who are outgoing and strong and maybe more intense learn to harness that energy in a more helpful and societally acceptable kind of way. Now, once again, I think sometimes people kind of like to see other people get their comeuppance, and Emma is definitely kind of in that sphere of things. But once again, this is still about a young woman learning how to really come to grips with her own heart, her own motivations, and her behavior and her sense of entitled know-it-allness. And I really love it. I think a lot of women could learn from Emma, whether or not they are like Emma. Emma is in some ways a bit of an early prototype of a girl boss, but unlike other girl bosses of today, Emma gets told, she gets read to filth by none other than Mr. Knightley. Okay, so let's unpack this. So when the story starts, Emma is about 20, and she's probably in her early 20s, throughout the novel. So she's quite young, and there is this neighbor and close friend of her family who is 37 years old. So there's at least 15 years between Emma and Mr. Knightley. And Mr. Knightley is quite outspoken, but in a very calm and mature way. Because guess what? He is calm and mature. But even though he is fairly calm and mature and will often call Emma out in a very calm and mature kind of way, there is a breaking point. There is a breaking point. And so what is fascinating about this book is that it is told in third person omniscience. So we get to really see what Emma is thinking and feeling, but we also get to see what Mr. Knightley is thinking and feeling. And he is incredibly wise. He can foresee things that Emma does not foresee. And this is what I really like, because although she is intelligent, she is not disciplined, and she simply is not experienced. Whereas Mr. Knightley has been around the block a bit, and he knows what Emma does not know. And so when Emma misbehaves or does something wrong, he is very much there to point it out and be like, hey, this isn't right. What are you doing? Now, Emma is, like I said, in her early 20s, but she is surrounded with women who are in less than secure positions, okay? So she is, let's say, upper middle class or upper class, young, well-to-do lady, but she has some female friends, as you do, and these female friends are coming from positions of disempowerment. So we have Jane Fairfax, who is an orphan. We have Harriet Smith, who is a daughter of a tradesman. She's a very poor young lady in the neighborhood. And once again, she's only 17 when she's introduced. Jane is also not incredibly old. She's around the age of Emma. So these are very young women. Now, Jane Fairfax has an aunt called Miss Bates, who is a spinster, and she is older. So this is a tough life for Miss Bates because Miss Bates represents women like myself who are on the shelf and who are basically staring down the guns of old age and dying alone, essentially. And in those days, women could not necessarily go out to work very easily and things like that, especially if you were in the middle class. So she's living on a very, very tight stipend. She's not rich at all. She's struggling. And basically, she is, not in a position of power. So we have all of these women around Emma, and none of them are giving her pushback. So the only pushback she's getting is from Mr. Knightley. And it's very interesting because we get to see how Emma is basically controlling the women around her. And this is an example of female bullying, which is very social based. It's very much based on relationships and interaction and who's giving advice and who's actually making the decisions. So while Harriet is very much in love with this, very ordinary tradesman kind of guy, Emma is there to tell Harriet, oh no, girl, you could do better. And I think this is where there's just so much that I could unpack because once again, we have girls who are being encouraged to look upward to something that maybe is outside of their ken or outside of their means. And so Harriet, who is a very lovely girl, is basically encouraged to pursue men who have no interest in her because she is poor and she has no family background really. And in the process, Harriet starts really jeopardizing her potential relationship with the man who truly loves her. So in the end, of course, thankfully, Harriet is able to actually marry Mr. Martin, and and she is able to be with her true love. And of course, other relationships are kind of touched on with Jane Fairfax and everything. But I really wanted to focus talking about Harriet because Harriet is younger than Emma. And basically, Emma is bullying her into making decisions that are not her own. So if a guy ever sees a girl making decisions that are strange and wild, and a good question to ask is there another woman in the situation leaning on that female? Because females are incredibly sensitive to words and they read into everything, and they are more likely to struggle with knowing what they want, or even if they know what they want, they're going to struggle with, let's say, speaking out about what they actually want. And so in the case of Harriet and Emma, we have a toxic female dynamic. And of course, Emma, thankfully, is rescued from being a complete controlling bully by the end of the book. But it's a very fascinating discussion. And I wish we could see more of this in films where we see the struggle of strong women to actually mature and use their strength in a positive kind of way. Because I'm not against having Guy Ladriels, as Nerdrotic would say, in stuff. It's just how they're handled that is a problem these days. Because there seems to be a lot of justification for poor behavior and bad attitudes, when in reality, we can celebrate female strength without celebrating being a dick. So this is a very great book to assess from that light. But I also want to give a shining light on Mr. Knightley, because Mr. Knightley is a man who has this age and he sees the potential in Emma. He respects her on many levels. He loves her as a friend and wink, wink, nudge, nudge as something else as well. But the truth is that Emma has a little ways to go before she's really ready to understand what she needs in her life and what she is relying on in her life. Because right now at the moment, she's smelling her own farts, right? She's thinking she's all that. And Mr. Knightley is there to take her down a peg. Now, there's this moment where basically Emma makes fun of and humiliates Miss Bates, the poor spinster. And it's really painful to watch. Now, Miss Bates in the 2020 film is wonderfully acted by Miranda Hart. And it's just sad. You understand what Emma did. She humiliated this older woman in front of people, even though this woman, Miss Bates, had been with her throughout most of her formative years and had been a companion. And the fact that this woman is going through this downward slant in her life, so she's not going to be as educated as Emma. She's not going to have the opportunities that Emma has. And here is Emma shitting on this woman and humiliating her. And instead of fighting back, Miss Bates is like, oh, she must be right. Oh, yes, yes. And she kept harping on it because she's kowtowing to the girl power in the room. Because remember, girls have hierarchies, okay? They might talk about the patriarchy, but what we really need to talk about is the matriarchy, because it does exist between women. And as a woman who has been fighting against the female hierarchy for years, because I just want to do my own thing. Please leave me alone. Don't judge me. Leave me alone. Just leave me alone. So anyway, yeah, okay. So, you know, what Emma did to Miss Bates was really cruel, like really cruel. And is anyone going to say anything about it? Her mom is dead. Her dad is a bit too lenient. So who's going to say something? Mr. Knightley is going to say something. So let me spoil you on Mr. Knightley's speech. It's a bit hard to follow because it is a bit ye old English. But basically, he comes up to her and says, I must speak to you. I must once more speak to you as I have been used to do. A privilege rather endured than allowed, perhaps, but I must still use it. I cannot see you acting wrong without a remonstrance. How could you be so unfeeling to Miss Bates? How could you be so insolent in your wit to a woman of her character, age, and situation? Emma, I had not thought it possible. Emma recollected, blushed, was sorry, but tried to laugh it off. Nay, how could I help saying what I did? Nobody could have helped it. It was not so very bad. I dare say she did not understand me. Mr. Knightley replies, I assure you she did. She felt your full meaning. She has talked of it since. I wish you could have heard how she talked of it, with what candor and generosity. I wish you could have heard her honoring your forbearance in being able to pay her such attentions as she was forever receiving from yourself and your father when her society must be so irksome. So once again, he's touching on how basically this older woman is groveling. This older woman is very aware of the difference between herself and Emma in terms of intelligence, in terms of education, in terms of money, in terms of resources, in terms of so much. And Mr. Knightley is like, yes, this woman is sometimes not as, tasteful and graceful and da-da-da as you, but look at her life. They are blended, said he. So he's talking about how the good and the ridiculous are very much present in Miss Bates. They are blended, said he, I acknowledge. And were she prosperous, I would allow much for the occasional prevalence of the ridiculous over the good. Were she a woman of fortune, I would leave every harmless absurdity to take its chance. I would not quarrel with you for any liberties of manner. Were she your equal in station, but Emma, consider how far this is from being the case. She is poor. She is sunk from the comforts she was born to, and if she lived to old age, must probably sink more. Her situation should secure your compassion. It was badly done indeed. You, whom she had known from an infant, whom she had seen grow up from a period when her notice was an honor, to have you now in thoughtless spirits and the pride of the moment laugh at her, humble her, and before her niece too, and before others, many of whom, certainly some, would be entirely guided by your treatment of her. This is not pleasant to you, Emma, and it is very far from pleasant to me, but I will tell you truths while I can, satisfied with proving myself your friend by very faithful counsel, and trusting that you will sometime or other do the greater justice than you can do now. So what I want to tease out some things here. Number one, he points out that Emma is a leader, and therefore she is responsible. She is responsible because she's a powerful voice in the female community. So what she did opened the doors for other people to do that to Miss Bates. And so he's basically saying, look, you are powerful. I recognize your power in this hierarchy, and this is why I'm coming to you. He's also recognizing the hierarchy between the two women. He's saying, yes, there's a difference. And because of this difference, you should be compassionate. I also think it's very interesting to notice that he reassures her in this way by saying, I know, I trust you will change, that you will make right. And I think this is really very fascinating. Her response is very fascinating. He puts her in the carriage. He misinterprets the feelings that kept her face averted. They were combined only of anger against herself, mortification, and deep concern. She had not been able to speak, and on entering the carriage sunk back for a moment overcome, then reproaching herself for having taken no leave, making no acknowledgement, parting in apparent sullenness. She looked out with a voice and hand eager to show a difference, but it was too late. He had turned away, and the horses were in motion. Never had she felt so agitated, mortified, grieved at any circumstance in her life. She was most forcibly struck. The truth of this representation there was no denying. She felt it at her heart. How could she have been so brutal, so cruel to Miss Bates? How could she have exposed herself to such ill opinion in any one she valued? And how suffer him to leave her without saying one word of gratitude, of concurrence, of common kindness? So basically, when he came out and was like, badly done, she just shut down. And before it was too late, she realized, I haven't been able to say, I hear you, I recognize you're right, I'm going to fix this, or whatever. And this is really a great moment. I wish more people could reread this story and just think about human behavior, because I think Emma can apply to men as well. I think there are lots of men who are very strong and have great opinions and have a desire to be supportive and encouraging, but in the end they become bullies, they become controlling, and they end up really damaging the relationships of people around them. So whether you're a man or a woman, in my opinion, I think you can learn a lot from Emma. And in this situation, I think you can understand and really feel the human moment, as it were, as she realizes, I fucked up. And I haven't been able to tell this person that I admire and I respect. I haven't been able to tell them, hey, I heard you. I understand. I did wrong. And I just really believe that Emma is a book that we could learn so much from. I think a lot of Marvel Cinematic Universe writers, superhero writers, writers in World of Warcraft would learn so much if they paid attention to what's going on in Emma. Because Emma is a story about an empowered female learning how to be truly empowering and empowered. Because being empowered should never be about stepping on other people. And Emma is a story about a woman who learns this. There are lots of stories about men who learn it. But Emma is a rare story about a woman learning it. Because guess what? Women are not all the time just victims of social circumstances. Women also can become toxic. Women can become domineering. Women can become unreasonably aggressive, and women can sometimes become the worst versions of themselves. And so Emma is basically a reminder that women play a part in hierarchy formation just as much as men do. In fact, perhaps even more so. As someone who was bullied when she was a child by other girls, socially ostracized, told to be quiet or leave the room or whatever. I was never like severely bullied, but I was very much ostracized and put on the outside. I was socially awkward. I didn't make things better by being intensely disagreeable sometimes, but I recognize the power of the female hierarchy. And so when I went to university and I heard all of this talk about the patriarchy, I just sat there thinking, yes, there have been a couple men, like less than 5 in my life, who I looked at and I thought, you're a douchebag. Shut the fuck up and get out of here. Die already. But I could count more than one hand of the women who negatively impacted me. And so to me, I think Emma is a great story for women who are very strong, to understand the difference between being strong and empowered and having an opinion, and being a bully and silencing opinions and things and pushing people into situations and emotionally manipulating them, and so on and so forth. I also think it's a great book for girls who struggle with getting a spine. By looking at Harriet Smith and Jane Fairfax, I think girls who struggle with speaking up could learn quite a bit on how to deal with and handle friends that are incredibly pushy. And it's a really a great reminder that you can also find happiness. You just got to stand up for your own voice and for your own experiences. I think it's a great read for men of all kinds. I think men who are strong like Emma could also learn from Emma. I think any human can learn from Emma. But I also think it's very important for everyone to learn from Mr. Knightley as well, because Mr. Knightley does what few people are doing in Emma's life, which is speaking to her in truth and in love and saying, hey, girl, you got to get this together. What are you doing here? And I really respect Mr. Knightley, because confronting somebody is very difficult. As Dumbledore said, it is very courageous to, fight for your friends, but it's even more courageous to stand up for them. And that's why he gave Neville Longbottom some house points at the end of Philosopher's Stone. I think Mr. Knightley shows that there is something to be learned about the importance of standing up and quietly and respectfully and lovingly confronting people in your life. Now, I'm saying people in your life because I don't think being Mr. Knightley for, somebody you don't know is helpful. That's not very helpful. But I'm talking about people in your life with whom you are rubbing shoulders. If you're coming at it from a place of relationship and love, sometimes you are going to have to say difficult things to them. And this is a great moment. At the end of the book, Emma realizes that it's very possible that one of her friends might marry Mr. Knightley. And she freaks out because she realizes at the end that she doesn't just respect Mr. Knightley. She needs Mr. Knightley. She loves Mr. Knightley. Happily, Mr. Knightley is of the same opinion. So despite their major age difference, they get married. And part of it, I think, is because Emma is actually quite mature in terms of her intelligence and things like that. She needs somebody much more stable to counterbalance her and her energy. And I really look at this relationship. It's a bit of an odd couple relationship, but I think it really works to me because there are women who do need quietly strong men in their life, not men who are going to run around screaming like morons or whatever, but men who are competent and who are always there and very reliable and things like that. And Mr. Knightley is one of them, and he is able to basically be the mirror to Emma. And thus they end up together at the end. Emma realizes that, you know what, love is helpful, love is important. So not only does Emma recognize the importance of a relationship, once again, she's an avowed spinster at the beginning, remember? So she's almost like those feminists who are like, I don't need a man, okay? I'm going to be single. It's going to be fine. And then what happens? She's like, actually, you know what? I really do need someone in my life. And if it's going to be someone, I really need Mr. Knightley. So I really think there's so much that Emma could teach modern women. And I hope people keep reading the books and keep thinking about it. Once again, I'm not suggesting that all women should be married. That's ridiculous. But I think that there's a lot of little lessons from Emma that are so pertinent to what's going on today in film, what's going on today in video game story development. And I think Emma is a must read. If you really want to check Emma out, I'm sure there are audiobooks out there. Check out Emma. I hope you enjoy it. Leave a like down below. Subscribe to the channel, all of that. And let me know in the comments whether you've ever heard of Emma, whether you knew about what the story was about. And also let me know if you're thinking about giving it a try now. Definitely watch the film and tell me what you think in the comments below. I'll see you all next time. Take care.